Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and decode a real puzzle. How on earth did a small, super mountainous country with absolutely zero natural resources manage to build the wealthiest population on the planet? We're going to unpack what I like to call the Swiss paradox, looking at the history, the politics, and the industries that turned a seemingly terrible geographic hand into a global economic powerhouse.
Right off the bat, let's talk about this staggering figure, $910,382. According to the UBS Global Wealth Report, that is the average wealth of a Swiss adult. It makes them the absolute global champions of wealth, sitting comfortably ahead of massive economies like the US and Luxembourg. But to really appreciate how they pulled this off, we have to realize just how unlikely this whole thing actually was.
So here is the crucial point, the paradox itself. Think about the usual building blocks of a rich nation. Oil, coal, iron. Switzerland has absolutely none of them, zero. It's completely landlocked. The land is dominated by the Alps and the Jura Mountains, which makes a huge chunk of the territory totally uninhabitable. And historically, it was just this fragmented collection of medieval regions, completely boxed in by massive expansionist empires like the Habsburgs. Yet, despite all of those massive hurdles, today, 1 in 8 adults in Switzerland is a dollar millionaire. Seriously, how does a place with literally no geographic advantages mint so many millionaires?
Section 1. Constraints breed true innovation. Let's look at building wealth without resources.
Well, to solve this mystery, we have to see how those severe geographic constraints actually force the culture of incredible discipline and innovation. A lot of modern economics suggests that having a ton of natural resources can actually be a curse. It makes a country lazy, relying on just one commodity. Switzerland didn't have that luxury at all. Geographically, they were sitting right smack in the middle of the Blue Banana, which is this historic, super active trade corridor stretching from northern Italy all the way up to England. Since early Swiss workers couldn't just dig bulk commodities out of the ground, they had to leverage their spot on this transit route. They literally had no choice but to specialize in refining raw materials and developing really high-value skills just to survive and participate in this intense flow of goods and ideas.
And this wealth didn't just pop up overnight. It compounded over centuries, kind of like a giant snowball. It kicked off way back in 1291 with the Rutli Oath, creating these early alliances for mutual support. Fast forward to the 16th century, Protestant Huguenot refugees flood in, bringing incredibly valuable specialized skills like watchmaking and silk processing. By the 19th century, that background in textiles rapidly evolved into advanced machine manufacturing and early chemistry. Then hit the 20th century. Switzerland's strict neutrality preserved all its capital and its factories. So while the rest of Europe was tragically devastated by world wars and had to literally rebuild from the rubble, Switzerland was sitting there fully intact, ready to meet the massive post-war demand.
Moving to Section 2, a machine for stability. This is the political engine driving the economy.
Now, you don't get an economy this wealthy without rules that make long-term decisions rock solid. Switzerland operates on this really fascinating system of direct democracy. Basically, any citizen can propose a constitutional change, called a popular initiative, just by gathering 100,000 signatures. That forces a nationwide vote. And you might think, wow, wouldn't that just cause total chaos? But actually, it does the exact opposite. It creates a highly negotiated, incremental, and incredibly stable policy environment. The government is constantly forced to find wide consensus, which means those massive sudden political whiplashes you see in other countries, very, very rare here.
On top of that stability, we have to talk about decentralization. Think about a highly centralized government. National leaders can just push through sweeping tax policies with almost zero local competition. Not in Switzerland. Their system is sliced up into 26 highly autonomous cantons, kind of like states. And here's the kicker. They set their own taxes, and they compete directly with each other to attract residents and businesses. By decentralizing power like this, it forces local governments to be hyper-efficient. I mean, if a canton raises taxes without providing absolutely incredible public services, people and money will literally just pack up and move to the canton next door. And that intense competitive pressure, it leads to unbelievable fiscal discipline. It's perfectly reflected in their national debt to GDP ratio, which sits at a shockingly low 38%. When you build institutions that force local governments to justify every single fiscal choice in a live, competitive environment, you get low debt, fantastic services, and some of the lowest income taxes in all of Europe.
Section 3. The high-value economy. Let's uncover the engine room of Swiss prosperity.
Okay, so we've looked at the deep history and the political machinery, but what is actually driving the modern Swiss economy today? When most of us think of Switzerland, we picture, secretive private banking and luxury ski resorts, right? Well, the actual data completely shatters that cliché. Check this out. Banks and insurance, they make up about 8.9% of the economy. Tourism is surprisingly tiny at just 3%. Meanwhile, their massive, high-value manufacturing sector accounts for almost 19% of their economic output. Switzerland isn't just hiding money or hosting skiers, it is a highly advanced industrial powerhouse.
And when we break down that manufacturing dominance, it gets even more interesting. They don't try to compete on volume. They compete on ultra-high margins. A massive 50% of their exports are on pharmaceuticals and chemicals. Companies like Roche and Novartis literally lead the world here. Another 12% is machinery and electronics, and about 8.6% are those famous luxury watches. Basically, Switzerland sells competence, scientific depth, and absolute reliability. Global buyers are more than willing to pay a massive premium just for that precision and error reduction.
So Switzerland's true superpower is taking wildly complex research, often stuff generated at elite technical hubs like ETH Zurich, and commercializing it with absolute clockwork precision. They've managed to build this perfect ecosystem where strong property rights, ready venture capital, and a highly educated, practically trained workforce just seamlessly align. It's commercialization with continuity, and it works flawlessly.
Section 4. The Inequality Reality Check. It's time to pull the curtain back on the Swiss formula. So clearly, the system is a wealth-generating machine, and it's been running hot for generations. But we have to ask, is everyone actually enjoying the exact same slice of this massive economic pie? Remember this massive number we started our explainer with? $910,382, the average wealth of a Swiss adult. It paints this rosy picture of universal, staggering riches, doesn't it?
But, boom, here is the median wealth, $145,555. Now remember, the median is the statistical midpoint. Half the population has more, half has less. When your average is creeping up on $1 million, but your median is under 150 grand, that tells a vastly different story about everyday reality for the average worker.
This gap exposes some pretty intense hidden inequality. Look at the Gini index. This is basically a measure of how fairly wealth is distributed. 0 means perfect equality, and 100 means one person literally owns everything. Switzerland sits at 77.9. That is a highly concentrated wealth distribution. Sure, it's not quite at the extreme levels of the United Arab Emirates at 88.4, but it is way more unequal than a neighboring European country like Belgium, which sits down at 60.2.
Let's look at the UBS data to spell it out even more clearly. This intense concentration means that while 13.1% of the population are dollar millionaires, which is amazing, this relatively small elite group holds around 69% of the total private wealth in the entire country. The vast majority of the incredible wealth we've been talking about is concentrated right at the very top. So yes, while the Swiss are generally very well off in terms of purchasing power compared to their neighbors, the extreme wealth is highly centralized.
Ultimately, looking at this whole picture, we have to ask ourselves a pretty big question. Is this Swiss model a blueprint that other nations could actually copy? I mean, could your country actively design this finely tuned machine of direct democracy, decentralized tax competition, and high-margin specialization? Or is the Swiss paradox just a one-of-a-kind historical masterpiece, completely forged by hundreds of years of strategic neutrality, intense geographic pressure, and the compounding of early advantages? It is a fascinating question, and one I'll leave you to ponder. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.